I'm happy for them, for their families, for their parents. But one must remember that the original amnesty was supposed to cover a much greater number of people. And as Khodorkovsky said, I still have hostages left back in Russia, in Russian prisons.
Do you see a new Putin behind this, or just...
I see more of the same Putin, who tries to manipulate the public opinion in the West, but he is so far gone that he believes that these small actions will garner him the support from the West, which will allow Western leaders to come to the Olympics. That is his greatest concern.
The Winter Olympics in Sochi in what is it, a month and a half or something like that.
Right.
Now, we see Mikhail Khodorkovsky here. Your own story, you ran a business that had sort of a connection to him. You don't necessarily know him personally, but had a connection. Tell us a story.
Well, the business I ran was an oil tanker company, which was owned by the holding company that was owned by Mr. Khodorkovsky. We transported the majority of the oil and fuel products that were coming out of Russia on the Russian river system. As soon as the attack started on Yukas, Khodorkovsky's company, our company became a target as well. And as a result...
In what way?
In order to limit Khodorkovsky's resources, the goal of the state and state-controlled police, state-controlled prosecutors, state-controlled courts was to take control of those resources, those assets. And the methodology is quite simple. You come up with very large tax claims that have no basis in fact and no basis in law, but they're there nonetheless. And immediately you issue criminal charges against the management. So you tie up the company in courts and you limit the management's ability to protect the company. So for me, as soon as this attack was imminent, I was called into the office of the director of the company, was told, you must leave Russia, you have 2 days notice. If you don't, we cannot guarantee your safety. So with an 8-month pregnant wife, we got up and went back to Copenhagen, where I have my home.
So you just left right away?
2 days notice. It took me a day to buy the tickets and get permission from the doctor so she could fly home.
And the reason why the Russian authorities were going after the company you were part of was because of the connection to Khodorkovsky?
It was a direct connection, and that is documented in the extradition papers that they sent to Denmark, the arrest orders that they issued. Basically, they said, this is a Yukas asset, and our goal is to take it over. And eventually...
And there was nothing you could do?
I could flee.
You could flee?
Right.
Good for you.
Yes, my wife thinks as well.
But now, then you come to Denmark, and as I understand it, you actually you continue the business for a while.
That's correct. One of the ways that they try to take over a business is, of course, freeze its bank accounts. But because I was able to control the financial operations while living in Denmark, for a couple of years we were still able to operate. But again, you can't do this indefinitely. They have ways of making things happen that you just cannot fight. You can't fight the state apparatus.
But you tried to fight it?
Yes. Because I had a fiduciary responsibility as a manager protecting shareholders' assets.
And what has happened to the company?
It was declared a bankrupt through the tax claims. Basically, all its assets were moved to another company, which are operating fine, earning money for people who were involved in the attack on the company, and not a single ruble of the tax that has been paid in 7 years.
And you had paid all your taxes?
Absolutely.
Did it surprise you it happened? You know Russia.
What surprised me is that, yes, I would say it did surprise me because one believed at a certain point that things were changing. The reason I went back to Russia in 2000 is because I believed there was a breath of fresh air. Khodorkovsky started...
You left with your family in the mid-70s or something like that?
Correct. As a refugee, we left in 1976 for the United States. I came back because I believed there was a wind of change. Khodorkovsky started a transparency movement. He actually declared all of the assets, all of the corporate holdings of Yukas, And in fact, that made it much easier for the state to attack it, because they knew exactly where everything was.
But he also stuck his neck out, in a way, politically.
Mr. Khodorkovsky believed in the fact that the constitution of Russia was sacrosanct, and the rights that were afforded to people, whether they're business people, whether they're citizens of low or high rank, were sacrosanct. And all he did was exercise his right to express his views. He started the civil society. He started funding the internet distribution in Russia. He wanted people to feel free, and he paid for it.
And he paid for it 10 years behind bars.
That's a very steep price to pay.
He's out now. Some people say that this actually shows the strength of Vladimir Putin. He's not afraid anymore. He feels that he can control what's going on. What's your take on this?
I think anybody who thinks that they can control Mr. Khodorkovsky are deluding themselves. I think being in jail, Khodorkovsky was a very big thorn in Mr. Putin's side. And Putin, putting himself into that corner, decided to take the thorn out. Only time will tell how it'll play out.
You're fairly optimistic.
There's no other alternative. One has to be optimistic.
You could also think, when you look at what's going on, that Putin has won.
Only time will tell. Nobody could have predicted that Gaddafi would end up dying in a ditch in a road. Nobody predicted that Bashar Assad would be in the throes of a civil war. I certainly do not want violence in Russia to be the cause for the overturning of that regime. But I know that there is pressure, and will happen.
Now, what we're seeing on the pictures here is one of the Pussy Riot women, and I can't see which one, coming back to Moscow. Do you see them playing a role? Obviously, they're courageous. They have not given in.
I'm very proud of them. I'm very happy that there are people like that who are willing to sacrifice their comforts and their freedoms for the sake of their fellow citizens. I believe that's Tolokonnikov. I can see her face.
I think you're right. It's hard to see behind the cameras there.
Right. It's very courageous. And the fact that she started out as a performer and she ended up as a prisoner of conscience, according to Amnesty International and according to me, and she became a human rights representative. That's quite an achievement in such a short time.
Now, even though you live in Denmark now and you have not been extradited to Russia, if I understand it correctly, it still makes your life difficult, or what?
Well, difficult is an understatement because the Russians have learned, or the Putin regime, using their KGB experience, have learned how to manipulate the systems that we have in place in the West. The Interpol system exists to capture fugitives. Now,
the International Police Cooperation.
Right. Now, what the Russians have decided to do is issue Interpol red notices on all their enemies. And their latest count, there are 18 UCAS people in London. I think the majority of them have political refugee status. Nevertheless, they're on Interpol, and they cannot travel anywhere. By doing this to your opposition, you basically do not expend any resources in hounding people. You allow the Western police organizations to do it for you, which is a shame because it reduces the value of an Interpol red notice. And after a while, people start looking skeptically at what is behind, what is the political motivation there.
They're looking skeptically at Russia or at you?
Well, I think they're looking skeptically at the Interpol red notices that are coming from Russia.
That are coming from Russia.
Right.
But can you travel?
At this stage, I have the ability to travel to a very limited number of countries where I have been, where I have received assurances from their internal ministries of interior that I would be safe.
And are you engaged in somehow fighting Putin?
I believe that the only thing that evil needs to triumph is for good people to keep their mouths shut. I certainly have no intention of keeping my mouth shut.